She cheated and called me a workhorse, but one moment in court changed everything. The courtroom smelled of old paper, polished wood, and the stale breath of too many people crammed into one space. The walls were lined with books that no one read, their spines stiff and untouched, more for show than function. The judge, a woman with short-cropped silver hair and eyes that had seen too much, sat on her high perch, peering down at the rest of us like a queen passing judgment on peasants. I sat at the defendant's table, my hands clasped together, so tightly my knuckles were turning white. My lawyer, Claire Mathers, flipped through a folder, her manicured nails clicking against the pages as if she already knew the outcome and was just going through the motions. Across from us, Sophia sat with perfect posture, one leg crossed over the other, her back so straight she could have been carved from marble. She was wearing white. Of course she was. The color of innocence. A delicate gold bracelet dangled from her wrist, catching the light every time she moved. It was new, expensive, not something I had bought her. I knew better than to expect fairness in divorce court. Justice wasn't blind here. It had a favorite, and it sure as hell wasn't me. I was the man, the husband, the workhorse she had ridden until I had nothing left to give. And now, she wanted to discard me like a broken tool. The bailiff called the room to order, his voice a gravelly boom that rattled through my ribs. The opposing lawyer, a man with sharp features and the kind of arrogance that came with overconfidence, stood up first. Your Honor, my client has endured an exhausting and emotionally taxing marriage. She entered this relationship believing she had a partner, only to find herself burdened with a man who lacked ambition, who stagnated instead of striving for more. She gave everything to this marriage, only to be met with disappointment. The words stung, but I didn't flinch. I had been expecting them. I risked a glance at Sophia. She sat there, composed, watching her lawyer spin a story where she was the saint and I was the deadweight. She didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. Then she spoke. Ryan has always been a hard worker. Her voice was smooth, practiced, the same tone she used when she used to talk to guests at dinner parties. But some men work hard and build something. Others, well, they just work. They don't climb. They don't evolve. They just exist, like a workhorse. Strong, dependable, but ultimately useless in the long run. A ripple of amusement passed through the courtroom. Someone even laughed. Laughed. I clenched my jaw so tight I thought my teeth might crack. Claire shot me a look. Don't react. That's what she wants. But inside, something snapped. I had always known Sophia thought she was better than me. I had felt in the way she sighed when she looked at my work boots by the door, the way she rolled her eyes when I came home late from a double shift, the way she spoke about her real estate investor friends and their lavish vacations while I was the one keeping our mortgage afloat. But to hear her say it so casually, like it was some universal truth, like I was beneath her, I let out a slow breath, steadying myself. I could feel the judge's eyes on me, waiting to see if I would crack, if I would be the angry, bitter husband Sophia wanted me to be. But I wouldn't give her that satisfaction. Instead, I sat back, folded my hands on the table. Let the words settle. Let them sink in. And then, beneath the burn of humiliation, something unexpected emerged. A clarity. A realization. She had just given me exactly what I needed. Because now, I knew for certain, I wasn't fighting to keep something worth saving. I was fighting to take back what was mine. I met her gaze across the courtroom, and for the first time in our entire marriage, I saw something flicker in her eyes that wasn't amusement. It was doubt. Outside the courthouse, the city moved on, uncaring. People rushed past, faces buried in their phones, shoulders hunched against the autumn wind. The world didn't stop for heartbreak. It never had, never would. I took a deep breath, letting the crisp air fill my lungs, letting the sting of it sharpen my thoughts. The weight of Sophia's words still pressed against my chest, but beneath it, something else stirred. Not anger, not grief. Clarity. For the first time in a long while, I let myself truly look back. Sophia and I met on a Wednesday. I remember because I had just come off a 12-hour shift at the site, my boots still caked in mud, my hands raw from a long day. She was sitting at the bar, effortlessly put together, deep red lipstick, legs crossed, sipping something in a delicate glass. I had no business walking up to her, but she looked at me first. "You look like you need a drink," she had said, her voice smooth, teasing. I did, but I needed her more. That first conversation was easy. She laughed at my dry humor, leaned in just enough to let me think I had a chance. And when she scribbled her number on my receipt, it felt like I had stepped into someone else's life. Someone luckier, someone meant for more than hard work and tired nights. I should have known then. I should have realized that love, real love, isn't something you have to earn like a paycheck. The thing about Sophia, she was intoxicating. She had this way of making you feel like the most important person in the room until you weren't. At first, it was small things. She'd pout when I picked up an extra shift, sigh when I came home late. She'd playfully complain about our tiny apartment, about the used furniture, about how we deserved more. And she wasn't wrong. So I worked harder. When she wanted the downtown condo with the floor-to-ceiling windows, I put in more hours. When she wanted weekend getaways, I found side gigs. When she quit her job to find her passion, I tightened our budget, took fewer lunches, said no to the things I wanted so she could have everything she needed. And she thanked me, at least at first. But gratitude has an expiration date when someone believes they're entitled to more. I can't pinpoint the exact moment things changed. Maybe it wasn't a moment. Maybe it was a series of moments stacked on top of each other like bricks in a wall I hadn't noticed being built. I do remember the way she started looking at me. Not with admiration, not with love, with disappointment. Like I was something she had once wanted but had now outgrown. Like I was the old car she had driven through college, reliable, familiar, but embarrassing to be seen with now that she had a better parking spot. I tried. God, did I try. I surprised her with dinners. I asked about her dreams, her goals. I told her she was beautiful, that I was proud of her. But love is not a solo act. You can't hold up both ends of a relationship on your own. And Sophia? She had already started checking out. I see it now, clear as day, but back then I was blind. Or maybe I just refused to see. Our third anniversary. I'd spent months planning it. She had been talking about this one restaurant, some high-end place where the waiters wore suits and the portions were small, but the prices were big. I booked a table. And after dinner, a surprise weekend away at a cabin up north, just the two of us, no distractions. I can still see the way she looked at me when I told her. Not excitement, not joy, just a small, unimpressed nod. "That's it," she had said. 2 words. That's all it took to hollow me out. I had smiled through it. I had told myself she was just tired, that she didn't mean it like that. But deep down, I knew. I knew I was giving her everything. And she thought it still wasn't enough. It didn't take long after that for the truth to unravel. She stopped pretending, stopped hiding the late nights, the vague explanations, the sudden weekend trips with her friends. And then, one night, I found the receipt. A necklace. Elegant, expensive. The kind of thing I would have saved up months to buy for her. But I hadn't bought it. And when I asked her about it, she had laughed. Laughed. "Oh, Ryan, it's just a gift for a friend." A friend. I had nodded, swallowed the bile in my throat. And something inside me, something strong, something important, cracked. It took me longer than it should have, but eventually I did what I should have done a long time ago. I stopped trying. I stopped fighting for someone who had stopped fighting for me. And now, here we were, standing on opposite sides of a courtroom, the final wreckage of our marriage laid out like evidence at a crime scene. I exhaled slowly, my breath misting in the cool air. For so long, I had seen myself through her eyes. The workhorse, the beast of burden, useful only until he wasn't. But I wasn't that man anymore. Not today. Not ever again. I straightened my tie, rolled my shoulders, and stepped back into the courthouse. It was time to rewrite the ending. I should have seen the signs. Hindsight is a cruel teacher, always pointing out what you missed long after it's too late. The late nights with no explanation. The weekend trips with her friends that never included me. The way she'd roll her eyes when I asked how her day was, as if the mere sound of my voice was an inconvenience. But those are just cracks. The real break, the moment I knew, without a doubt, that our marriage was already dead, happened on our third anniversary. I had been planning for months. Our first date had been at this tiny Italian restaurant downtown, a family-run place with candlelit tables and mismatched plates that somehow made it feel more intimate. I remembered the way Sophia's eyes had lit up when she took her first bite of gnocchi, how she laughed when she got a smudge of sauce on her cheek. Back then, she had looked at me like I was the only man in the room. So, for our anniversary, I booked the same place. I even arranged for the chef, an old Italian man who barely spoke English but remembered us, to recreate our first meal. That was just the start. After dinner, I was going to surprise her with a weekend getaway. I had saved for months, cutting back on lunches, taking extra shifts, canceling personal expenses just to afford it. A cabin by the lake. Just us. No work, no stress, no distractions. I told myself it would remind her of what we used to have, of what we could still be. I was such a fool. The night arrived. I was waiting at home, dressed in the suit she once said made me look like someone important. I had flowers, a handwritten note, even a small gift, a necklace with a delicate silver pendant, something simple but thoughtful. She walked in an hour late. Not rushing, not apologizing. Just there. Her makeup was fresh, but not for me. Her hair was done, but not for me. There was a scent on her skin, something unfamiliar, something expensive. She barely glanced at the flowers. "What's this?" she asked, like I was presenting her with an inconvenience instead of an anniversary surprise. I swallowed, trying to ignore the gnawing feeling in my gut. Dinner reservations. At Rialto's, where we had our first date. I smiled, waiting for that flicker of nostalgia, that warmth I had been holding onto for years. Instead, she sighed. "Ryan, seriously?" I frowned. "What do you mean?" She shrugged off her coat, tossing it onto the couch like this was any other night. "I'm exhausted. Work was hell. Can't we just stay in?" Work? She hadn't had a job in over a year. I felt something cold crawl up my spine, but I forced a chuckle, hoping, praying that this was just a bad mood. "It's our anniversary, sophomore. Come on, I made plans." She looked at me then, really looked at me. And whatever she saw must have irritated her, because she scoffed. "That's it. 2 words. 2 words, and I felt the air leave my lungs. I had been expecting a reaction, maybe excitement, maybe gratitude, even mild appreciation. But disappointment? That's it. I stared at her, trying to process what she had just said. "I mean, a dinner reservation?" She laughed, shaking her head. "Come on, Ryan. You couldn't come up with something a little more, I don't know, exciting?" Exciting. I had worked overtime to afford this night. I had gone without things I wanted, scrimping and saving just to make this special. But it wasn't enough. I wasn't enough. She sighed dramatically, running a hand through her hair. "Look, I already ate. Ashley and I grabbed sushi after work, and I have an early morning tomorrow. So, can we just—" She waved a hand, dismissing me, dismissing us. And just like that, the moment was gone. I don't know how long I stood there, watching her kick off her heels, scroll through her phone like it was any other night. Something inside me cracked. Not all at once. Not loud like glass shattering. It was subtle, slow, like a rope that had been fraying for years, finally snapping under the weight. I placed the flowers on the counter, sat down at the kitchen table, and for the first time, I saw my marriage for what it really was. A lie I'd been telling myself. She didn't even notice. Didn't notice how I stopped speaking. Didn't notice how my hands curled into fists under the table. Didn't notice the way my heart broke so quietly it didn't even make a sound. She just went about her night, humming a tune, texting someone with a small smile on her lips. I wanted to ask, I wanted to demand answers. But deep down, I already knew them. So instead, I picked up my jacket. I didn't say a word as I walked out the door. And she didn't ask where I was going. Maybe because she didn't care. Or maybe because she knew I wouldn't go far. Because that's who I was, wasn't it? The workhorse. The man who carried the load, no matter how heavy. The man who always came back. But that night, as I stepped into the cold, hands clenched in my pockets, something inside me whispered a quiet truth. Not this time. I stepped back into the courtroom with a different kind of energy. The kind that comes when a man has been dragged through fire, burned, and yet somehow, some way, he's still standing. Sophia sat in her chair, legs crossed, fingers tapping rhythmically against the polished wood of the table. Her lawyer, an overly confident man named Gregson, whispered something in her ear, making her smirk. I could already hear it. The next round of character assassination, the next attempt to paint me as nothing more than a pathetic, washed-up workhorse. But they didn't know. They didn't know that the foundation they had built their smugness on was already cracked. I sat down beside Claire, my lawyer, who adjusted her glasses and glanced at me. "Are you ready?" she murmured, low enough that only I could hear. "More than ready." Across the aisle, Sophia's eyes locked onto mine. There was something in her gaze, superiority laced with amusement. She thought this was a done deal. She had no idea what was coming. The judge rapped her gavel. "Court is back in session. Proceed." Gregson stood, adjusting his cuffs like he was preparing for a victory speech. "Your Honor, my client has suffered undue financial hardship due to the negligence and lack of ambition displayed by Mr. Ryan Carter. For years, she has shouldered the burden of maintaining their lifestyle, while he," Gregson turned to me, his lips twisting, "contributed the bare minimum." The bare minimum. I stared at him, then at Sophia. I wondered if she could still hear my voice in her head, back when I used to tell her I'd do anything to make her happy. Gregson wasn't finished. Mr. Carter's earnings were never sufficient for the life he promised. My client was forced to dip into her personal savings. Claire shifted beside me, and I could feel it the moment she decided she'd had enough. She stood, cutting Gregson off mid-sentence. "Objection. Misrepresentation of financial records." The judge lifted an eyebrow. "Explain." Claire walked to the center of the courtroom, opening a sleek black folder. "Your Honor, we have documented evidence that not only did Mr. Carter contribute more than his fair share to the marriage, but Mrs. Carter actively siphoned funds from their joint account for personal use. And," she lifted a separate document, "we have proof that the personal savings Mr. Gregson mentioned were, in fact, a separate account created by Mrs. Carter during the marriage, without Mr. Carter's knowledge." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Sophia's posture stiffened. I allowed myself a slow breath, feeling the weight of years of manipulation start to lift piece by piece. The judge gestured toward the documents. "Let me see those." Claire handed them over with the efficiency of someone who knew she had just fired the first real shot of the battle. As the judge flipped through the pages, Gregson shifted in his chair. Sophia, for the first time that day, looked uncertain. Claire continued, her voice smooth and measured. "We have evidence showing that Mr. Carter worked extensive overtime hours, sometimes pulling 60-hour weeks to ensure that Mrs. Carter could maintain her lifestyle. Meanwhile, Mrs. Carter made multiple large withdrawals, some of which funded vacations and luxury purchases that Mr. Carter was not informed of, nor invited to attend." The words landed like stones in the room, heavy and undeniable. Gregson tried to regain control. "Your Honor, my client had every right to manage her own finances." "Of course," Claire cut in smoothly. "But financial transparency is expected in a marriage, especially when the other party is being accused of not contributing enough." Mrs. Carter claimed financial hardship. The records tell a different story. The judge exhaled through her nose, her fingers steepled. "This is concerning. Mr. Gregson, how do you respond?" Sophia turned to Gregson, her lips pressed into a thin line. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, scanning the papers as if some loophole might magically appear. The silence stretched. Then Claire delivered the final blow. "Furthermore," she said, taking a slow step forward, "we have evidence that Mrs. Carter was not only financially dishonest, but also personally unfaithful." Sophia's head snapped up. Gregson sputtered. "Objection. Overruled," the judge said without hesitation. "Continue." Claire handed over another folder, this one thinner but somehow heavier than the rest. "We have hotel receipts, phone records, and messages exchanged between Mrs. Carter and an individual named Benjamin Langley. These interactions were not only ongoing throughout the marriage, but continued after the divorce proceedings had begun. If the courtroom had been murmuring before, now it was roaring. Someone in the back actually gasped. Sophia's composure cracked, her face draining of color. She turned to Gregson, eyes wide, like she had just realized she had been playing a game she was no longer winning. Gregson cleared his throat. "Your Honor, I'd like to request a recess." "Denied." The judge's voice was steel. "I believe we've heard enough for today." And just like that, the script had flipped. Sophia, who had strutted into this courtroom thinking she had already won, now sat frozen, her hands clasped too tightly in her lap. For the first time, she looked small. For the first time, she looked cornered. I sat back, exhaling slowly, letting it all sink in. I had walked in here feeling like a man carrying too much weight on his shoulders. I was walking out lighter. Not because I had won yet, but because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't the one being ridden into the ground anymore. The air in the courtroom was thick, humming with the kind of tension that precedes a storm. Sophia sat poised, legs crossed, arms folded, her expression a masterclass in feigned indifference. But I knew her too well. The slight twitch of her jaw, the way her fingers subtly tapped against her wrist. She wasn't as composed as she wanted everyone to believe. Claire, my lawyer, was the complete opposite. She moved with the unshakable confidence of a woman who had just placed a winning hand on the table. She adjusted the sleeves of her blazer, smoothed the papers in front of her, and then, in a voice as cool as steel, said, "Your Honor, I'd like to present evidence that directly contradicts the narrative presented by the opposing counsel." The judge, a stern woman with sharp eyes, gestured for her to proceed. Claire turned, picked up the first folder from our table, and walked toward the bench, her heels clicking against the polished floor. She placed the folder down with deliberate care. "These are the financial records for the duration of Mr. and Mrs. Carter's marriage. They include bank statements, mortgage payments, utility bills, credit card transactions, and other relevant expenses. You'll find that the majority of these costs, almost entirely, were covered by Mr. Carter." The judge flipped through the documents, her expression unreadable. The opposing lawyer, a sleek, well-groomed man named Eric Langston, frowned slightly but kept quiet. Claire continued, her voice steady, unwavering. "Despite Mrs. Carter's claims that she supported the household, the records show that she contributed very little, if anything at all. In fact, Your Honor, Mrs. Carter withdrew money from their joint account under the guise of household expenses, but the transactions tell a different story." She lifted a second folder and handed it over. "This is a detailed report of those transactions." Langston shifted in his seat. Sophia's posture stiffened. The judge peered down at the pages, flipping through them methodically. After a few moments, she raised an eyebrow and looked at Claire. "Explain." Claire didn't hesitate. "Your Honor, over the course of their marriage, Mrs. Carter transferred nearly $75,000 from their shared account into a private account. These funds were used to finance personal luxuries, spa treatments, designer handbags, private vacations, I should add, that did not include Mr. Carter." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. A few people in the back exchanged glances. The clerk coughed to hide what sounded suspiciously like a laugh. I didn't look at Sophia. I didn't need to. I could feel her seething beside me, her carefully curated facade starting to crack. Langston stood abruptly. "Your Honor, I fail to see the relevance of." Claire cut him off with a single raised finger. "I'm not finished." The judge allowed it, motioning for her to continue. Claire picked up the final folder, the one that would drive a nail into Sophia's carefully constructed coffin. "And finally," she said, her voice quiet but sharp as a knife, "we have proof of Mrs. Carter's infidelity." The murmurs turned into full-blown whispers. Someone in the back let out a low whistle. Sophia went completely still. Langston's mouth tightened. He whispered something to her, but she didn't react. Claire handed the last folder to the judge. Inside were photographs, hotel receipts, screenshots of text messages. Every careless, arrogant step Sophia had taken, laid out in black and white. For over a year, Mrs. Carter engaged in an extramarital affair with one Benjamin Hallows, a business associate she met during a so-called work retreat. These receipts show multiple overnight stays at luxury hotels, all paid for using the funds she withdrew from their joint account. I could hear Sophia's breath quicken, could feel the heat of her humiliation rising beside me. Langston was already on his feet, his voice forced and sharp. "Objection, Your Honor. This is an attempt to discredit my client's character." The judge held up a hand. "Sit down, Mr. Langston." He hesitated, lips pressed into a thin line, then obeyed. She turned her gaze to Sophia. "Mrs. Carter, do you have anything to say about these allegations?" For the first time since this entire circus began, Sophia looked truly shaken. Her lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. I had spent years hearing her voice, feeling the weight of her words, letting them dictate the way I saw myself. But now, she was silent. And that silence was the sweetest thing I had ever heard. The air in the courtroom was thick with tension. A quiet hum of whispered disbelief buzzed from the gallery, like the last echoes of a thunderclap before the storm truly settled. Sophia sat frozen, her face an unreadable mask of forced composure. But I knew her well enough to see the signs, the slight twitch of her fingers against her lap, the rigid set of her shoulders, the way she refused to meet my eyes. She was unraveling. Claire, my lawyer, turned to me. "Ryan, would you like to address the court?" I didn't hesitate. I stood, smoothing the wrinkles from my jacket, steadying my breath. My pulse thrummed against my ribs, a deep, deliberate drumbeat that told me, "This is your moment." I scanned the room slowly, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make them uncomfortable. The judge watched me with keen, measuring eyes. Sophia's lawyer avoided my gaze, clearly realizing they had bet on the wrong horse. Then I spoke. "Sophia called me a workhorse." The words felt heavy in my mouth, yet strangely satisfying. I let them linger in the air, let them settle into the minds of everyone present. And she's not wrong. A flicker of movement from Sophia, her fingers tightening against the armrest of her chair. Good, let her feel it. I worked harder than she'll ever know. Every extra shift, every sleepless night, every sacrifice, I made them all willingly. For her, for us. I exhaled through my nose, steadying myself. The anger, the resentment. It was all still there, coiled deep inside. But I wouldn't let it control me. I let my voice drop lower, more measured. She enjoyed the vacations, the designer bags, the weekend brunches with friends. But what she never considered was who paid for it all. I turned to the judge, locking eyes. It wasn't just money. It was time, energy, effort, things you can't put a price tag on. And yet, I gave them freely, believing that love was something you invested in, that if I just worked hard enough, she'd see me the way I saw her. I let out a small, breathy laugh, not out of amusement, but out of disbelief at my own naivety. But I was wrong. Sophia shifted in her seat. I saw it now, the first real crack in her armor. Her lawyer leaned in slightly, whispering something, but she barely seemed to hear. I wasn't done. Since she enjoys metaphors, let me give her one of my own. I turned towards Sophia now, and for the first time in the entire trial, she actually met my gaze. Yes, I'm a workhorse, but not because I'm weak, not because I lack ambition. It's because I carried the weight, and I never faltered, no matter how heavy it got. The room was dead silent. Then I did something that no one expected. I reached up, shrugging out my jacket, unbuttoned my shirt, one careful button at a time, revealing the truth beneath the polished exterior. The room collectively inhaled. Scars, calluses, the marks of a man who had labored, who had sacrificed, who had given everything to build a life with someone who had only ever taken. This, I said, my voice steady but laced with steel, is what being a workhorse looks like. I held their eyes, one by one, the judge, the opposing lawyer, the spectators. Finally, I looked back at Sophia, and I won't let anyone take away what I built. For the first time, Sophia had nothing to say. No witty retort, no condescending smirk, just silence. And in that moment, I knew I had already won. The courtroom was a different place now. The air had shifted, thick with something unspoken, an unsteady silence that felt like the moment before a storm. No one was laughing anymore. No smug smirks. No veiled jabs. The reality of the situation had settled over the room like dust after an earthquake. Sophia sat across from me, her once impeccable posture now slightly slumped. She wasn't looking at me anymore. Not like before, when her eyes had been filled with condescension and amusement. Now she stared straight ahead, her lips pressed together so tightly they had gone pale. Her lawyer was still scrambling, flipping through papers as if some magic clause would appear to undo the damage. But there was no undoing it. No more smoke and mirrors. The truth had been laid bare for everyone to see. The judge exhaled, slow and deliberate. She removed her reading glasses, folded them neatly, and placed them beside the thick stack of documents before her. The court has reviewed the evidence presented today, she began, her voice level authoritative. And it is clear that Mr. Ryan Carter was the primary financial provider throughout this marriage. Furthermore, the accusations made against him of laziness, of financial dependency, are not only unfounded but demonstrably false. A beat of silence. Then she continued. Additionally, we have indisputable proof of Mrs. Carter's financial misconduct and infidelity, both of which factor heavily into this ruling. Sophia's fingers tightened around the armrest of her chair. Her nails, always manicured, always pristine, dug into the polished wood. The judge glanced at her before delivering the final words. Therefore, this court rules in favor of Mr. Carter. The divorce settlement will reflect the accurate financial contributions of both parties, meaning Mrs. Carter is entitled to nothing beyond what she has personally earned. Furthermore, the court denies her request for spousal support. Silence. Absolute, ringing silence. Then a quiet gasp from someone in the gallery. A whispered murmur. But Sophia? She was frozen. For the first time since this battle had begun, I saw something in her face I had never seen before. Panic. Her lawyer leaned in, whispering furiously in her ear, but she wasn't listening. She was staring straight ahead, blinking rapidly, her breathing uneven. This wasn't the outcome she had planned. She had walked into this courtroom fully expecting to walk away victorious, wealthier, triumphant, untouchable. She had expected to watch me break, to see me defeated, humiliated, crushed beneath the weight of her carefully crafted lies. Instead, she was the one unraveling. I should have felt sorry for her. I didn't. Not after everything. Not after the years of sacrifice, of being used, of being made to feel like I was never enough. So I did what I had never done before. I stood up, slow and deliberate, buttoned my shirt, adjusted my sleeves, and then, with absolute control, I turned to her. Looks like the workhorse finally outran you, I said quietly. Sophia's lips parted, as if she wanted to respond, but no words came. Just silence. And then, without another glance, I walked out of the courtroom. Out of the past. Out of the weight of everything she had made me carry. And as I stepped into the fresh air, the sun warming my skin, I realized something. I wasn't broken. I wasn't weak. I was finally free. Twisted love when she came back. But I moved on. The house still smelled like her. I didn't know why. It had been almost a year since Jenny packed up her things and walked out the door, choosing another man over the life we'd built together. I'd scrubbed the floors, washed the sheets, even bought a new couch. And yet, some nights, I swore I could still catch the faintest trace of her perfume in the air. Maybe it was all in my head. The thought clung to me as I pulled into my driveway, stepping out of my car with my gym bag slung over my shoulder. My body ached from the 3-hour karate session. Every muscle burned, my knuckles throbbed, and there was a dull pain in my ribs from a poorly blocked kick. I liked the pain, though. It reminded me I was still here, still moving forward. Training was my salvation. Without it, I might have drowned in the silence Jenny left behind. I walked up the steps to my porch, already reaching into my pocket for my keys when I saw her. Angela. She was sitting on the wooden swing, one leg crossed over the other, her foot bouncing lightly in the air. She wore jeans and a snug green sweater that clung to her curves. Her dark brown hair pulled into a loose ponytail. A half smile tugged at her lips as she lifted a hand in greeting. "Hey, stranger." I stopped in my tracks, blinking at her as my mind raced to catch up. Angela, Jenny's best friend. The one person I hadn't expected to see sitting on my porch like she belonged there. I hadn't seen her since the divorce. Not once. "What are you doing here?" I asked, too tired to dance around the obvious. Angela tilted her head, as if considering the question. I asked myself that exact thing about 20 minutes ago. She grinned. "But since I'm already here, what do you say? Want to buy a girl a beer?" I hesitated, my fingers tightening around the strap of my gym bag. Jenny's best friend, my ex-wife's closest confidant. This should have felt wrong, but for some reason it didn't. I exhaled and jerked my head toward the door. "Come on in. I need a shower first, though." Angela followed me inside, her boots clicking softly against the hardwood floors. The house felt different with her in it, less empty, less haunted by memories. She wandered toward the kitchen while I tossed my gym bag onto a chair, peeling off my sweat-drenched hoodie. "Still drinking that cheap beer?" she called over her shoulder. I smirked. "Only the finest." I disappeared into the bathroom, turning on the shower and letting the hot water work its magic on my sore muscles. As I washed, I thought about Angela. She was different from Jenny in every way that mattered. Jenny had been tall, blonde, and effortlessly poised. The kind of woman who turned heads in a crowded room. Angela was shorter, cavia, with dark eyes that always held a spark of mischief. And yet, they'd been inseparable. I shut off the water, dried off, and threw on a fresh t-shirt and jeans before heading to the kitchen. Angela was already seated at the counter, 2 open beers in front of her. She slid one toward me as I walked in. "Thanks," I said, taking a sip. She studied me for a moment, her expression unreadable. "So, how have you been, Nick?" I let out a dry chuckle. "You really want to know?" She gave me a look. "I wouldn't be here if I didn't." I sighed, leaning against the counter. "I've been busy. Work, training, trying to keep my head above water." Angela nodded. "Karate, huh? You always talked about getting serious about it." "Yeah, got a tournament coming up in Columbus." Her eyebrows lifted. "Impressive." She took a sip of her beer, then set it down. "Listen, I know this might be weird, me being here, but I don't know. I missed you." I studied her, searching for the catch. "Angela, if this is about Jenny." "It's not," she interrupted, shaking her head. "I swear, this isn't about her. It's about you." I stared at her, unsure whether to believe her. But Angela held my gaze, steady and unflinching. She wasn't lying. For the first time in months, I felt something shift inside me. A break in the monotony. A crack in the walls I'd built. Maybe this wasn't a mistake. Maybe it was exactly what I needed. The next few weeks fell into an easy rhythm, though I wasn't sure how it happened. Angela and I just started spending time together. At first, it was little things, grabbing a drink after work, watching a baseball game at my place. Then she started dropping by unannounced, like she'd always belonged in my life. I'd come home from the dojo, exhausted, and there she'd be, sitting on my porch steps with 2 beers, greeting me with that easy smile. "I'm starting to think you don't have a life," I joked one night, grabbing the cold bottle from her hand. She smirked, says the guy who punches and kicks things for fun. I chuckled and took a long sip, letting the bitter fizz of the beer settle on my tongue. The summer air was warm, thick with the scent of fresh cut grass. Angela stretched her legs out, the porch light casting a glow over her bare skin. "You training hard?" she asked. "Every damn day." She glanced at me, brushing a strand of dark hair behind her ear. "I don't get it. What's the goal? I mean, I know you're doing the tournament, but why?" It was a simple question, but I felt its weight. I leaned back, rolling the bottle between my fingers. "Because when I fight, I don't think about anything else," I admitted. "No past, no regrets. Just movement. Just action." Angela was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "I get that." She said it like she really did, like she knew what it was to escape something. That was how it always was with Angela. Effortless conversations, teasing that never felt forced, silences that weren't awkward. She never pried about Jenny, never asked me if I still missed her. If she was here to play spy for my ex, she was doing a damn good job pretending she wasn't. One Saturday, she showed up wearing an old baseball jersey that swallowed her frame, a Yankees cap pulled low over her dark hair. "Want to get out of here?" she asked. "Where to?" She grinned. "Ball game. I got us tickets." She drove us to the minor league stadium just outside of town, the air filled with the scent of roasted peanuts and sizzling hot dogs. We sat in the nosebleeds, laughing as she heckled the pitcher. "You gonna throw a real pitch, or should I come down there and show you how it's done?" she shouted, cupping her hand around her mouth. People turned. I shook my head, laughing. "Jesus, Angie." "What?" "I'm helping." She winked at me, then stuffed a handful of popcorn into her mouth. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't thinking about the past. I wasn't analyzing whether this was right or wrong. I was just there with her, and it felt good. When the game ended, we walked back to her car under the bright glow of the stadium lights. She tossed me the keys. "Want to drive?" I raised an eyebrow. "Since when do you let anyone drive your car?" "Since I had 3 beers, genius." I smirked, unlocking the doors. As we climbed inside, something shifted between us. Maybe it was the intimacy of the night, the shared laughter, or the way she sat close, her knee brushing against mine. I didn't know what this was, whether it was friendship or something tiptoeing toward the edge of something more. But I knew one thing. Angela wasn't just filling the empty spaces in my life. She was becoming something else entirely. And that terrified me. The moment I stepped inside Angela's apartment, I knew something was different. The kitchen table, usually cluttered with mail and half-empty coffee cups, was neatly set with a white tablecloth. 2 wine glasses sat side by side, filled just enough to catch the light of the flickering candles in the center. The scent of something rich and buttery filled the air, garlic, maybe rosemary. The whole scene was warm, intimate. And then there was Angela. She wasn't in her usual jeans or that oversized sweatshirt she loved. Instead, she wore a short black skirt that hugged her hips and a pale blue sweater that made her eyes look impossibly bright. Her dark hair, usually tied back in a ponytail, tumbled in loose waves around her shoulders. My pulse did something strange. "Damn, Angie," I said, trying to sound casual. "Are we going somewhere fancy?" And I didn't get the memo. She laughed, but there was a nervous edge to it. "No, I just felt like dressing up a little tonight." I wanted to ask why, but something in her expression made me hold back. Instead, I let my eyes linger on her for just a second too long before stepping forward. "It smells incredible in here," I said, inhaling deeply. "What are we having?" "Chicken piccata," she said, turning to the stove. "It's almost done." She moved gracefully, reaching for a wooden spoon, stirring the sauce in slow, deliberate motions. The golden light of the kitchen brushed against her skin, highlighting the curve of her neck, the delicate line of her jaw. I swallowed hard. What the hell was happening to me? For weeks, Angela and I had been friends. Good friends. But tonight, this didn't feel like friendship. This felt like something unspoken, something neither of us was ready to admit out loud. And the way she glanced at me, quickly and then away, like she was afraid of what I might see in her eyes, I wasn't imagining that. Dinner passed in a blur. The food was delicious, but I barely tasted it. I was too aware of how close she was, how the candlelight softened her features, how the scent of her perfume mixed with the citrus and butter from the meal. We talked, we laughed, we drank. And then, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, she led me to the living room. Soft music played from her speaker, something slow and low, the kind of song that wraps around you and lingers. Angela sank onto the couch, tucking her legs under her, and patted the spot beside her. I hesitated. I could leave right now, say goodnight, drive home, and pretend tonight was just another evening. Or I could stay. I sat down. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the music, the distant murmur of cars passing outside. Angela exhaled, almost like she'd been holding her breath. Then she turned to me, her dark eyes searching mine. "Nick," she said softly. There was something in her voice, uncertainty, maybe fear. I felt it too, that charged space between what we were and what we could be. I swallowed. Yeah. She bit her lip, hesitated, then reached out, her fingers brushing against my hand. Light, barely a touch, but it was enough. I caught her wrist, stopping her. "Angela, if you start this, be sure." She didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned in, her lips just a breath away from mine. "I've been sure for a long time," she whispered. Then she kissed me. The moment her lips met mine, something inside me cracked open. Her hand slid up my chest, fingers curling into my shirt. The kiss was slow at first, testing, learning. But then I cupped the back of her neck and deepened it, and she melted against me with a soft sigh. Heat surged through me. God, it had been so long. Too long since I'd felt a woman like this, soft and warm, pressing into me like she belonged there. My hands found her waist, then her hips, pulling her closer. Her body molded against mine, her breath hitching as I traced my fingers over the curve of her back. It was effortless. It was electric. It was everything I hadn't realized I needed. And then, she pulled away. Abruptly, like something had burned her. Her breath was ragged, her eyes wide, almost panicked. She stared at me, lips still slightly parted, fingers trembling where they clutched at my shirt. "Angela," my voice was hoarse. "What's wrong?" She shook her head. I can't." Before I could say anything, she shot up from the couch and bolted to the bathroom, slamming the door shut behind her. I sat there, heart hammering, every nerve in my body still lit up from the kiss. I had no idea what the hell had just happened. But I knew one thing for sure. Nothing between Angela and me would ever be the same again. The next morning, Angela was gone. Not just from my bed. She was nowhere to be found. No text, no call, nothing. I sat in my car outside her apartment for nearly an hour, debating whether to knock. My fingers hovered over my phone screen, rereading the last messages I'd sent her. "Angela, we need to talk. Please." Nothing but silence. A part of me wanted to believe she needed space, that maybe she was embarrassed about how she bolted after kissing me. But the way she'd looked at me before running off, the panic, the regret, it gnawed at me like an open wound. By Monday, frustration had settled into my bones. I wasn't the type to chase people, but Angela wasn't just anyone. She had waltzed into my life again, flipped my world upside down, and now, nothing. Davis met me at our usual bar after work. He took one look at my scowl and ordered 2 whiskeys. "All right, spill," he said. I swirled the glass in my hand, watching the amber liquid catch the dim light. Angela kissed me. His brows shot up. And that's bad, Hal. Because right after, she ran out of the room like she'd seen a ghost. Locked herself in the bathroom. I haven't heard from her since. Davis whistled. Damn, that's dramatic. I downed the whiskey, the burn settling deep in my chest. I don't get it, man. We were hanging out for weeks. She wanted this. I know she did. Then suddenly, she's gone. Davis leaned back, considering. Sounds like she's dealing with something. I scoffed. No kidding. But what? If she regretted it, fine. Just say so. But radio silence? That's bullshit. He nodded, then tilted his glass toward me. Only one way to find out, brother. I gritted my teeth. He was right. If Angela wasn't going to give me answers, I'd get them myself. I tried once more before showing up at her door. My fingers drummed against the steering wheel as I stared at her apartment building, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the street. One more time. I pulled out my phone, tapped her contact, and hit call. It rang. Once. Twice. 3 times. Then, to my surprise, she picked up. Angela, I said immediately. Silence. I could hear her breathing, shallow and hesitant. Talk to me, I urged. If you don't want this, just say it. But don't leave me in the dark. More silence. Then, finally a whisper. Nick, I can't. A sharp pang shot through me. Can't what? I need time. The words were fragile, but something about them felt off, like an excuse, a way to push me away without really saying why. I clenched my jaw. Damn it, Angela. Time for what? A shaky breath on the other end. I have to go. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, my pulse hammering. Something wasn't right. And I was done waiting for answers. That night, I threw myself into training with an aggression I hadn't felt in years. Every punch, every kick, every drop of sweat felt like a way to rid myself of the frustration curling inside me. But it didn't help. Not really. Angela had gotten under my skin. By the end of the week, the irritation had simmered into something else, determination. If she wasn't going to tell me what was going on, I'd find out myself. I was going to see her, and this time, she wouldn't run. Angela had been avoiding me for nearly 2 weeks. I wasn't the type to chase, but something about the way she pulled away that night haunted me. The way her lips trembled against mine, the way her hands clung to me like she wanted me more than anything, only to shove me away like she was terrified of it. I needed answers. That's how I found myself parked outside her apartment on a cool Saturday afternoon, gripping the steering wheel like it held the key to understanding her. For the first time in months, I wasn't thinking about my karate tournament, my broken marriage, or even the scars Jenny had left on me. All I could think about was Angela. I climbed out of the car and marched to her door. My heart pounded as I knocked. Silence. I knocked again, louder this time. A shadow moved behind the peephole. A long pause. Then, finally, her voice, muffled and uncertain. Nick, I can't see you right now. Her words were like a slap. A week ago, we were tangled on her couch, kissing like the world was ending. Now, she couldn't even look at me? I exhaled sharply. Well, that's a problem, Angie, because I'm not leaving until we talk. Please, just go. No. Silence. Then the lock clicked. The door opened an inch, just enough for me to see her. Her dark brown eyes looked exhausted, rimmed with smudges of sleepless nights. She wasn't dressed to impress tonight. No heels, no perfect makeup, just an oversized t-shirt and leggings. But somehow, she looked more real than ever. She hesitated. I don't know if this is a good idea. I leaned against the doorframe. Neither do I, but I think we should find out. She swallowed hard. Then, as if something inside her crumbled, she stepped aside and let me in. Inside, the place felt smaller than I remembered, like the walls had shrunk with the weight of whatever she was keeping inside. The living room was dimly lit, the scent of lavender candles lingering in the air. A half-finished glass of wine sat on the coffee table, next to a book she clearly hadn't been reading. Angela wrapped her arms around herself and leaned against the couch. You shouldn't be here, Nick. Then why did you let me in? She looked away. I sat down, stretching my legs out. All right, let's cut the bullshit. You kissed me, Angela. You wanted that just as much as I did. I know, she whispered. Then why run? She closed her eyes, exhaling through her nose. Because it's not that simple. I studied her, waiting. She didn't offer more. Look, Angie, I've been through enough games to last me a lifetime. So if this is some kind of mind trick, it's not, she interrupted, her voice sharp. She looked at me then, and for the first time, I saw it. The fear behind her walls. I care about you, Nick. I do. But I've been keeping something from you, and I don't know if I can tell you without ruining everything. I sat forward. Try me. Angela hesitated, fingers gripping the hem of her shirt like she needed something to hold on to. Then, finally, she spoke. This is about Jenny. The name hit me like a cold wind. I clenched my jaw. What about her? Angela bit her lip, looking torn between wanting to tell me everything and wanting to shove it back down. She's not happy, Nick. I scoffed, leaning back. Yeah, well, that's what happens when you leave your husband for another man. Angela flinched. It's not that simple. I laughed bitterly. You keep saying that. She rubbed her arms, exhaling. Alec wasn't who she thought he was. He was charming at first, but after a while, things changed. He got controlling, then angry, and then… She trailed off, but I caught the meaning. Alec had hurt her. For a moment, I didn't say anything. I stared at the flickering candle on the table, watching its flame twist and writhe. Jenny, my wife, the woman who had ripped my heart out and fed it to another man. And now, she was suffering. I should have felt nothing. But I did. Not love, not longing. Just a bitter, aching sadness for what we used to be. Angela watched me closely. She regrets leaving you, Nick. She wants to come back. My jaw tightened. And let me guess, she sent you to test the waters for her. Angela shook her head quickly. No, at first maybe, but she broke off, looking away. I frowned. But what? She swallowed hard, her voice barely a whisper. But then I fell for you. The words settled between us like a storm cloud. She didn't move, didn't breathe, as if waiting for me to reject her, to call her a liar, to storm out and never look back. But I didn't, because deep down I already knew. I stood up, walking over to her. Angie, I murmured, look at me. She did, slowly. I reached out, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. I don't love Jenny anymore, I said, my voice steady. I love what we had, but that's gone. Her breath hitched. Nick! I tilted her chin up. What about us? Tears filled her eyes, but this time, she didn't run. She didn't hide. And in that moment, I knew. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning. Angela sat across from me, curled into the corner of her couch, hugging a throw pillow to her chest. The apartment was dimly lit, casting soft shadows on the walls, and the only sound was the distant hum of her refrigerator. She wouldn't look at me. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. Angela, talk to me. She sighed heavily. I don't even know where to start. Start with why you kissed me like you meant it, then ran like hell. She flinched. Her fingers tightened around the pillow. Because I did mean it. My chest tightened. Then why did you pull away? Angela chewed on her bottom lip. I could see the conflict in her eyes, the war waging inside her. Finally, she spoke. This started as something else, Nick. Something I didn't plan for. I clenched my jaw. What does that mean? She took a deep breath, then exhaled slowly, as if trying to push something heavy from her chest. I need you to know, first, that I didn't come into this with bad intentions. I missed you. That's real. The way I feel about you, that's real too. But the reason I showed up that first day, the reason I came back into your life, it wasn't just me. It was Jenny. At that moment, the room seemed to shrink around me. What? My voice came out cold, distant like it wasn't mine. Angela's gaze finally met mine, guilt written all over her face. She wants you back, Nick. I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. You're joking. I wish I was. I shot up from the couch, pacing the length of her small living room. My skin burned, my pulse pounded in my ears. Unbelievable. She leaves me, cheats on me, then what? Decides she made a mistake and wants to rewind time. Angela swallowed. Pretty much. I turned, pinning her with a stare. And you? What? You were sent here to feel me out. To warm me up to the idea? She shook her head, eyes glistening. At first, maybe, but it wasn't like that, Nick. I swear. I let out a bitter laugh. Enlighten me, then. Angela hesitated, then folded her legs beneath her, pulling herself upright as if bracing for a storm. After Jenny left, we barely talked. She and Alec were living in some fancy downtown apartment, and I assumed she was happy. But then about 6 months ago, she called me. She was crying. Angela's voice wavered, and for the first time, I saw something beyond guilt, pain. She told me Alec had changed, that he wasn't who she thought he was. At first, it was little things, jealousy, control, put her down in front of people. But then one night he snapped. He hit her, Nick. A cold weight settled in my chest. I clenched my fists, every muscle in my body going rigid. I had never wished harm on Jenny, even after what she did, but hearing this, it made my blood boil. She left him after that, Angela continued, voice barely above a whisper. She packed her stuff and went to her sister's place in Cleveland. That's when she started talking about you, regretting everything. She said leaving you was the biggest mistake of her life. That she. Angela broke off, shaking her head. It doesn't matter. I sat back down, staring at the floor. The anger hadn't left, but something else settled in its place. Exhaustion. So she sent you? My voice was flat. No. Angela looked at me fiercely now. I came to you on my own. At first, I thought maybe I'd just check in, see how you were. Maybe I wanted to gauge if there was still something there between you two. But the more time I spent with you, the more I realized. She trailed off. Realized what? Her lips parted, but the words took a moment to come out. That I didn't want you to go back to her. That I wanted you. My breath caught. I didn't expect it, Nick, she continued, voice raw. I never saw you that way before. But then we started spending time together, and it just happened. And that night, when we kissed, I knew it wasn't just some old friendship turning into attraction. It was real, and it scared the hell out of me. Silence stretched between us. I studied her, my mind a tangled mess. The betrayal of Jenny's scheme. The truth of Angela's feelings. The undeniable fact that, despite everything, I wanted her to. So why run? I asked. Tears welled in her eyes, because I felt like I was stealing something that wasn't mine. Like maybe, deep down, you still belonged to her. I exhaled, running a hand down my face. Angela. She shook her head quickly. I know it sounds stupid, but I care about you, Nick. And I couldn't. No, I wouldn't. Let myself be the reason you made the wrong choice. I let her words settle. Jenny was my past, a wound I had stitched up with blood and sweat and time. I had spent months convincing myself I was over her, that I had moved on. And now here she was, trying to pull me back into a life that wasn't mine anymore. But Angela? She had never been part of the plan. And yet, sitting across from her, hearing the way her voice trembled, seeing the way her hands curled tightly in her lap, I realized something. I wanted her in my life, not as a friend, not as Jenny's messenger, but as something real. I reached across the space between us, taking her hands in mine. She looked up, startled. Angela, I said, my voice steady now, sure. I don't belong to Jenny anymore. I don't even think I ever did. Her breath hitched. What about me? She whispered. I tightened my grip on her hands. Let's find out. Angela's confession hung between us like an exposed wire, sparking with tension. I sat still, my heart hammering as the weight of her words settled over me. Jenny wanted me back. For a moment, my mind flashed back to our early years. Lazy Sundays in bed, road trips with no destination. The way she used to rest her head on my chest and whisper about the future. But then came the fights, the indifference, the way she packed her bags with barely a glance back. chasing after a man she thought was better than me. And now she was drowning, looking for a lifeboat. I wasn't it. I exhaled, steadying my voice. I don't love Jenny anymore, Angela. Her breath hitched. Her fingers curled into the fabric of her oversized t-shirt, as if bracing for impact. Are you sure? I nodded. I love the memory of us, the idea of what we were. But that's gone. It died the moment she walked out. Angela's dark eyes locked onto mine, searching. For doubt? For hesitation? I wasn't sure. You were never part of my past with Jenny, I continued. You were my friend too, and these last few months? They weren't about her. They were about us. A small, nervous laugh escaped her lips. U.S. She repeated the words softly, as if testing how it tasted. I leaned forward. I need to know, Angie, do you want this? Do you want me? Her hands trembled slightly, but she didn't pull away when I reached out, fingers brushing over hers. Nick, her voice cracked. I thought I was helping Jenny, but then I got caught up in it. I started looking forward to our nights out, to our talks, to you. And that night, when I kissed you, I realized something. She swallowed hard, eyes glossy with unshed tears. I wasn't testing the waters for Jenny. I was testing them for me. I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath until it escaped in a slow exhale. And a hesitant smile curved her lips. And I think I've been an idiot. I chuckled, squeezing her hand. Well, we've both been idiots then. A charged silence fell between us, but this time, it wasn't heavy with doubt. It was something else, something electric. Angela shifted forward, her face inches from mine. Tell me this isn't a mistake. I shook my head. The only mistake would be walking away now. She closed the space between us, pressing her lips against mine. This time, there was no hesitation, no guilt, just warmth and certainty. Her hands slipped up my arms, fingers gripping my shoulders like she was afraid to let go. I pulled her closer, feeling the way she melted against me. This wasn't desperation. This wasn't filling a void. This was real. When we finally parted, she let out a breathy laugh. So what now? I smirked. Well, I've got a tournament trophy collecting dust in my car, and I'm starving. How about we order pizza and watch a terrible movie? She grinned. Nick, that might be the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. We laughed, and just like that, the past loosened its grip. Jenny was gone, but Angela was here. And for the first time in a long time, I knew I wasn't alone anymore. The perfect marriage was a lie, until I discovered the truth. They say love blinds you. I never thought I'd be the kind of man to fall for an illusion, but that's exactly what happened. Looking back, the warning signs were there, subtle, easy to overlook but undeniable. I ignored them, mistaking them for quirks of love rather than the cracks in my reality. I met Molly on an unremarkable autumn afternoon in the cereal aisle of a grocery store. She stood on tiptoe, stretching for a box of Cheerios just beyond her reach. When I plucked it from the shelf and handed it to her, she gave me a smile, so warm it felt like a private sunrise. Thanks, she said, brushing a stray blonde curl from her cheek. Her voice was light, playful. You must be taller than you look. I laughed. Or you're just shorter than you think. It was a simple exchange, one of those fleeting moments you expect to forget as soon as it's over. But then, she lingered. Scott, right? I frowned. Yeah. Have we met before? She bit her lip, looking almost embarrassed. Sort of. I've seen you around. I might have asked about you once or twice. I should have been unnerved. Instead, I was flattered. There was something thrilling about the idea of a beautiful woman noticing me before I'd even noticed her. It made me feel chosen, special. The rest was a blur. First date, second date, falling in love so fast it felt less like a choice and more like gravity. We married within 2 years, and for a while, I truly believed I had everything I'd ever wanted. But Molly didn't come alone. She was a triplet, 3 sisters, identical in every way that mattered. Molly, Amy, and Hannah, 3 versions of the same woman, moving through the world with a synchronized grace that unsettled me, though I could never quite explain why. They were inseparable, their lives so entwined it was as if they shared the same heartbeat. At first, I found it endearing. Their closeness was something special, something sacred. I admired it, but admiration slowly turned to unease. I first noticed it in the small moments. The way they spoke in half-finished sentences, trusting each other to fill in the blanks. The way they exchanged glances across a room, entire conversations passing between them in silence. The way, when they laughed together, it sometimes felt like I was the punchline of a joke I'd never understand. And then there was the physical closeness. They draped over one another absent-mindedly, hands brushing, fingers grazing, heads resting on shoulders in ways that felt just a little too intimate. Once, I walked into the kitchen to find Molly and Amy curled up on the couch, their legs tangled together like lovers rather than sisters. When I cleared my throat, they didn't flinch, didn't even acknowledge the oddness of it. I tried to dismiss my unease. This was just how they were, closer than most siblings, more comfortable with touch. It wasn't my place to question it. But there were other things I couldn't ignore. Sometimes, I'd catch Amy looking at me a little too long, her blue eyes gleaming with something unreadable. Other times, Henna would brush against me in passing, the touch lingering half a second too long. And sometimes, late at night, in the darkness of our bedroom, Molly would kiss me in a way that felt different, almost like someone else. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was paranoid, until the night I overheard them. That was the night the illusion shattered. The night air carried the scent of freshly cut grass and something faintly floral, Molly's perfume, perhaps lingering from earlier that evening. I had come home late from work, exhausted but ready to sink into the comfort of dinner with my wife. Instead, I found an empty house. The silence was wrong. Molly always left the light on, even if she stepped out. But tonight, the house was dark, abandoned. I stood in the entryway, frowning, when I heard it, muffled laughter, feminine and conspiratorial, drifting through the open kitchen window. Amy's house. My pulse quickened. It was nothing unusual for Molly to be with her sisters. They were a unit, an inseparable trio. But something about the sound of their laughter made me pause. It wasn't the warm, casual kind of laughter shared between family. No, this was different. It was sharp, knowing, private. I stepped outside, drawn to the voices. My footsteps were soundless against the damp grass as I moved toward the source. The back door to Amy's kitchen was open just a crack, enough for their words to slip through. I wasn't planning to eavesdrop. Not really, but when I heard my name, I froze. Amy's voice, teasing, "Well, if he's not the best, why do you always want to switch with me?" Switch? A chill ran through me. Molly, laughing softly. I didn't say Ari isn't good. I just said he doesn't touch me the way Scott does. The world tilted beneath me. My breath caught in my throat. What the hell were they talking about? Hannah, smugly, "Oh, please. You already get Ari more nights a week than any of us, plus weekends." More laughter. A scrape of a chair against the tile floor. The clinking of wine glasses. My mind scrambled to make sense of their words. Switch? Nights with each other's husbands? I felt my stomach drop, a slow, sickening descent into realization. Molly's voice again, casual as ever. "It's been almost a year, and I just don't think Scott can do the job." My heartbeat pounded in my ears. The job? Amy, so you have a backup plan? Silence stretched, then. Molly lightly, "Of course. If his sperm count doesn't improve, he got tested last week, so we'll know soon. I'll just spend a few nights with Ted when I'm most fertile." Simple. Either way, it's a little boring being with Scott every night. And when I know I'm safe at the end of my cycle, I'll spend a couple of nights with Ari. Ted, my neighbor, my friend. My vision tunneled. Amy's laughter filled the space again, bright and unbothered. "No way, Molly. That's not foolproof. You're not getting Ari again until you're pregnant." The words rang in my skull like a bell. Pregnant. The edges of my world blurred. The voices became distant, warped. I gripped the doorframe to steady myself. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a joke. This was planned. My wife, my Molly, was talking about getting pregnant with another man's child. And worse, she wasn't the only one. They were all in on it. My hands trembled. The whispers, the lingering touches, the way I sometimes caught Hannah staring at me too long, or the way Amy would casually mention things about my sex life with Molly, things I had never told her. They weren't just sisters. They were orchestrators, a secret society, a conspiracy. I needed to move. I needed to get out of there before I did something reckless. With slow, measured steps, I backed away from the door. I turned and walked home, my body rigid with barely contained fury. The moment I stepped inside, I locked the door behind me and exhaled shakily. My fists ached from how hard I had been clenching them. Molly's words played on repeat in my head. It's a little boring being with Scott every night. She wasn't just betraying me. She was playing me. A quiet rage settled into my bones. I had two choices: pretend I didn't hear anything and live in blissful ignorance, or find out just how deep this nightmare went. And I already knew what I had to do. It was the small things that haunted me first, the passing touches that lingered a second too long, the way Amy smirked at me when Molly wasn't looking, the way Hannah sometimes said my name, soft, testing, as if she was tasting it. Looking back, it was always there. The signs, the moments that didn't quite fit, but I had forced them into place anyway, convincing myself that what I had with Molly was real. But it wasn't. It was something else entirely. That morning, after hearing their conversation, I woke up next to her and felt like I was in bed with a stranger. She lay there, tangled in the sheets, her face peaceful, her breath slow and steady, as if she hadn't spent the night plotting my humiliation, as if she wasn't scheming to let another man father our child. I had never been an angry person. I had never been jealous or suspicious. But now, the rage curled inside me like a living thing. I wanted to grab her, shake her, demand she tell me the truth. But I didn't. Instead, I kissed her forehead like I always did and whispered, "Sleep in, baby. I'll make you some coffee." I needed time. I needed proof. I needed to understand just how deep this went. So I watched. I started with something simple. That afternoon, I texted Molly, saying I'd be home late. A last-minute meeting at work. Her response was quick, almost too quick. "Molly, no worries, babe. Love you." I knew what that meant. The sisters had a schedule. The way they spoke about it, casually like a business arrangement, it made my skin crawl. I drove home early, parked my car a block away, walked the rest of the way, silent, unseen. Molly's car was in the driveway. So was Ari's. But Ted's? Ted's was missing. My heart pounded. I forced myself to breathe. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe Ted had just run an errand. But as I crept through the side yard, approaching Amy's kitchen window, I knew I wasn't that lucky. Through the glass, I saw them. Amy and Molly, sitting at the table, wine glasses in hand, laughing, and across from them, Ari. The words were muffled, but I caught enough. "Amy, it's getting complicated." Ari, "Not if we stick to the rules." Molly, "And what if Scott figures it out?" A pause. A heavy, weighted pause. Then Amy smirked. "Then we deal with it." I stepped back, my hand shaking. What the hell did that mean? That night, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, staring at my own reflection. I looked normal. I looked like me. But I wasn't. Not anymore. I had spent the day tracing the pieces of this puzzle, and the picture they formed was monstrous. This wasn't just a twisted little fling. It wasn't a lapse in judgment. It was orchestrated. A system. I thought about the times Molly had come home late, her cheeks flushed. The way Amy always joked about men being interchangeable. The way Hannah sometimes watched me with an expression I couldn't quite place. Pity, maybe, or amusement. And then I thought about what they had said. Then we deal with it. My pulse roared in my ears. What did that mean? What would they do to me if they realized I was onto them? Would they lie? Try to gaslight me into thinking I was paranoid? Would they play the victims? Or was it worse than that? I needed more. I needed undeniable proof. The next day, I made my move. I went to Ted's house. He opened the door, a beer in his hand, his usual easygoing grin in place. But when he saw my face, the grin faltered. "Hey man, you good?" I forced a smile. "Yeah, just wanted to talk." He hesitated just for a second before stepping aside. "Sure, come in." The living room was cozy, the scent of coffee and aftershave hanging in the air. Pictures lined the walls. Ted and Amy on their wedding day at the beach in Paris. Smiling. Happy. Lies. I sat on the couch, rubbing my hands together, feigning nervousness. "Can I ask you something?" Ted took a sip of his beer. "Of course." I looked him dead in the eye. "You ever feel like the girls are keeping secrets from us?" It was subtle. The way his fingers tensed around the bottle. The way his jaw tightened. So briefly I almost missed it. But I didn't miss it. He forced a laugh. "Women, man, they have their own world, you know? Best not to overthink it." He knew. Maybe not everything. Maybe not the full scope of it. But he knew something. And that told me all I needed to know. This wasn't just between the sisters. The husbands, they were either in on it, or they were complicit in their silence. I left soon after, my mind spinning. I had seen enough. I knew now. I was trapped in something far darker than I had ever imagined. Something had shifted between us. I could feel it in the way I carried myself around Molly. Tense, cautious, as if I were sleeping beside a venomous snake that could strike at any moment. But I also felt it in her. She had begun watching me more closely, tilting her head when I was quiet for too long, running her fingers along my arm like she was trying to remind me of something, or maybe trying to keep me distracted. For years, I had taken comfort in the small rituals of our marriage. The way she curled up beside me while we watched TV, the way she traced circles on my back when she thought I was asleep. But now, everything felt rehearsed, or worse, performed. That night, she reached for me. We lay in bed, bathed in the dim glow of the street lamp outside, shadows stretching long across the ceiling. I was on my side, facing away from her, trying to steady my breath. But then her hand slid over my waist, fingers splaying across my stomach, pulling me toward her. "You've been distant lately," she murmured against my shoulder. I shut my eyes. I had to be careful. If I moved too quickly, if I let my rage show, she would know something was wrong. And I wasn't ready for that yet. I forced a chuckle, trying to sound tired. "Just work stressed, that's all." She hummed, her lips brushing against my skin. "I don't believe you." I stiffened. Her fingers tightened slightly on my stomach. "You've been different this whole week. Not looking at me the same way. Not touching me." She pressed herself closer, her voice turning softer. "Did I do something?" I swallowed hard. The sheer audacity of it, of her asking me that, almost made me laugh. "Did you do something? Did you lie to me for years? Did you swap husbands like a twisted game of musical chairs? Did you plan to carry another man's child while letting me believe it was mine?" I couldn't say any of it. Not yet. So instead, I turned in her arms, forcing myself to meet her gaze. Her blue eyes searched mine, concerned. She looked so real, so utterly genuine. A perfect liar. "Of course not," I said. "I just have a lot on my mind." She studied me for a long moment, then gave me a slow, knowing smile. "I can help with that." Her hands drifted downward, fingers teasing the hem of my shirt, slipping underneath. The intimacy felt suffocating. How many times had she touched me like this after being in another man's bed? My stomach twisted. I couldn't do this. I caught her wrist gently, stopping her movements. "Not tonight, Maul. I'm exhausted." Her smile faltered, just for a second. Then, just as quickly, she recovered, withdrawing her hand with a soft chuckle. Okay. I won't push." She rested her head on my chest, her fingers idly tracing over my ribs. "But don't shut me out, okay? I don't like it when you keep things from me." I felt a chill crawl down my spine. She didn't like it when I kept things from her? I lay there, silent, while her breathing slowed. It didn't take long for her to drift off, her body relaxed against mine. But I was wide awake, my pulse thudding in my ears. Her words echoed in my mind, over and over. I don't like it when you keep things from me. Neither do I, Molly. Neither do I. I had proof now, enough to know I wasn't crazy. My wife had been sleeping with another man. Not just any man. Ted, my neighbor, my friend. And worse, this wasn't just an affair. It was planned, orchestrated. A system carefully designed by three sisters who saw their husbands as interchangeable. The betrayal ran deeper than I could process. I spent hours, days, trying to decide what to do. Would I confront Molly? Demand answers? Scream at her until she had no choice but to admit what she'd done? Or would I pretend I didn't know? Let the knowledge rot inside me like an untreated wound? Neither option felt right. No, I needed to see it with my own eyes. Not just whispered conversations in the dark. Not just half-heard giggles and glances exchanged like secrets. I needed undeniable proof. So I set a trap. That Friday, as Molly sat on the couch scrolling through her phone, I kept my voice casual. I might be late tonight. Big project at work. She barely looked up. That's fine. I'll probably just hang out with Amy and Hannah. Of course she would. I nodded, grabbed my keys, and left. But I didn't go to work. I parked my car a block away from our house, turning off the headlights before stepping out. The night air was cool, carrying the distant hum of cicadas. The streets of Oakley Square were quiet, peaceful. It disgusted me. I crept toward our house, keeping to the shadows, my heart pounding like a drumbeat in my ears. I didn't want to be right. God, I wanted to be wrong. I wanted this to be some sick misunderstanding. But deep down I knew. The kitchen window was slightly open. A soft, golden light spilled onto the porch. I pressed myself against the house, moving slowly, carefully, until I could hear them. Molly and Ted. I forced myself to peek through the gap in the curtains. Molly stood by the counter, her body language relaxed, her head tilted back in laughter. Ted was close, too close, his hand resting casually on her hip. She reached up, trailing a finger along his jawline. You shaved, she murmured. Ted smirked. You noticed. I always notice. A slow exhale left my body, my vision tunneling. This was not the first time. This was routine. Then, without hesitation, Molly leaned in and kissed him. Not hesitantly, not guiltily, not like someone making a mistake. She kissed him like she had a right to, like he belonged to her, like I was nothing. Something inside me cracked. I should have burst in, screamed, demanded answers. But instead, I stood there, frozen, watching my wife press her body against my best friend, listening to her whisper secrets meant only for me. Ted pulled away slightly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. We can't stay here too long, he said. Scott's supposed to be at work, but you never know. Molly let out a soft laugh. Oh, please. He never questions anything. We have time. I clenched my jaw. My knuckles turned white. I never question anything. Had I really been that blind? Had they been laughing at me this entire time? Then, Ted reached for her hand and led her toward the stairs. Our stairs, the ones that led to our bedroom. I turned away. I couldn't watch them go up together. That would be the moment that broke me. But I had seen enough. I walked away from the house, my steps slow, controlled. I felt like a ghost moving through my own life, a spectator in a story I had never agreed to be a part of. There was no confrontation that night. No screaming match. No accusations thrown in anger. Instead, I did something far more permanent. I went home, and I started packing. By the time Molly returned later that night, the suitcase was already by the door. I sat at the kitchen table, a letter in front of me. She walked in, her expression casual at first, but then she saw my face. She knew. Her mouth opened, but before she could speak, I pushed the letter toward her. Read it. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. I watched as her face drained of color. When she finally looked up, there was something almost desperate in her eyes. Scott, please, I can explain. I let out a breath. Then, with quiet finality, I said, "No, you can't." And then I walked out the door. I stood outside my own house, watching through the window as Molly led Ted upstairs. My hands trembled, not from anger, but from something worse, cold, hollow realization. It was true. All of it. The whispers, the laughter, the cryptic conversations. The strange feeling that Molly was different some nights, more hesitant or more eager. The lingering glances between the sisters, the unspoken rules they shared. I had spent years living inside a deception so intricate, so perfectly woven, that I had never even seen the threads. Until now. I exhaled slowly, forcing myself to step back from the window, away from the sickening intimacy playing out beyond the glass. A twisted part of me wanted to stay, to watch, to gather more proof, to let the rage consume me. But I knew it wouldn't change anything. The truth was already carved into my bones. I had to leave. Back inside, the house was eerily silent. Our home, or at least it had been. I walked through the living room, running my fingers over the framed photos of Molly and me. There we were on our honeymoon, smiling under the golden glow of a Santorini sunset. Another picture, taken last Christmas, showed me with my arm around her, blissfully unaware that she was likely thinking about another man. Or maybe not. Maybe I wasn't even her husband that night. Maybe I had held Amy instead, or Hannah, never knowing the difference. The thought made my stomach churn. I sat at the kitchen table, hands gripping the pen so tightly it almost snapped. I wasn't sure what to say. How do you put betrayal into words? How do you sum up the realization that your entire life has been a lie? I began writing. Molly, I know everything. I know about Ted, about Ari, about your games. I know that the love I believed in was nothing more than a mask you wore, one of many you and your sisters have perfected. I know I was never a husband to you, only a role to be played in your twisted little world. And most of all, I know this. I'm leaving. I won't scream. I won't beg for answers. I won't give you the satisfaction of seeing me break. I hope, one day, you feel even a fraction of what I feel right now. Goodbye. Scott. I placed the letter on the kitchen counter, right where she would see it. Then I walked to the bedroom, the same bed she had warmed with another man just minutes ago. I took only what I needed, a bag of clothes, my passport, my phone. I wouldn't look back. As I reached the front door, I hesitated. The old Scott, the one who had spent years adoring Molly, believing in her, wanted to turn around, wanted to wait until she came home to see her face when she read the letter. But I wasn't that man anymore. I turned the knob, stepping into the cool night air. As I walked to my car, I glanced once more at Amy's house. The kitchen lights were still on. I imagined them in there, sipping wine, laughing, spinning more lies to trap the next fool who wandered into their web. I gritted my teeth. No more. I slid into the driver's seat and started the engine. The road stretched out before me, dark and endless, but for the first time in a long time, I felt something close to freedom. I had lost my wife. But maybe, just maybe, I had finally found myself. I drove for hours without a destination, gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. The road stretched before me, empty and endless, swallowed by the night. I turned off my phone somewhere past the city limits, silencing the vibrating reminders of my shattered life. Molly was calling. Of course she was. At some point, I pulled into a roadside motel, the neon sign buzzing in the quiet. The room smelled like bleach and stale air. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall, trying to make sense of it all. What had been real? The way Molly used to hold my face in her hands when she kissed me? The way she whispered my name in the dark? The way she'd roll over in the morning and nuzzle against my chest, sighing contentedly? Had any of it been real, or had I simply been playing a role in a script she had written long before I even met her? I turned my phone back on. 37 missed calls, 3 voicemails, and 1 text. Scott, please, just talk to me. I pressed play on the first voicemail. Her voice was frantic, breathless. Scott, I don't know where you are, but please come home. I can explain everything. I swear it's not what you think. Not what I think. I'll play the next one. Okay, you're scaring me now. Just, just tell me you're okay. I love you. You know that, right? We can fix this. Fix this. The last voicemail was different. Her voice was softer, quieter, the kind of voice she used when she wanted to manipulate me. Scott, I know you're listening, and I know you're angry. But before you do anything drastic, just remember, secrets go both ways. Let's not make a mess of things. Call me. I froze. Secret go both ways. My breath hitched. What did that mean? Was she bluffing? Or did she actually have something on me? I wasn't perfect. I had my share of mistakes. But nothing like this. Nothing that could justify what she had done. Right? I put the phone down, rubbing my temples. My mind was a hurricane, swirling with questions I didn't want to ask. How long had she been planning this? Was I the only husband in Oakley Square who had found out? And the worst thought of all, the one that made my stomach lurch, was Molly pregnant? Had she already switched me out for Ted? Or Ari? Had she already sealed my fate as the unwitting father to a child that wasn't mine? I stood abruptly, pacing the small room. I had to do something. But what? Going back wasn't an option. I knew that. I could never look at Molly the same way again. But leaving wasn't enough. I couldn't just disappear and let them get away with it. They had been playing a game for God knows how long. But I could play too. I picked up my phone, staring at Molly's last message. Then, for the first time since leaving, I smiled. Let's not make a mess of things, she had said. Oh, Molly, you have no idea what kind of mess I'm about to make. While I buried our son alone, my wife vacationed in Hawaii with her lover. Jacob stood at the front of the church, his hands curled into fists at his sides. The air was thick with the scent of lilies and melting candle wax, a cloying, suffocating fragrance that made his stomach churn. He barely heard the priest's voice, soft, solemn, offering words that meant nothing. He kept his eyes locked on the casket. Small, too small. Noah should have been here, squirming in his seat, fidgeting with the collar of his dress shirt, whispering that he was hungry, that he was bored. Instead, he lay inside that wooden box, buried beneath white roses, trapped in a silence that Jacob could never break. His son, his beautiful, laughing, 5-year-old son, gone. And Claire, his wife, Noah's mother, was nowhere to be found. Jacob had spent the past week convincing himself that she was grieving in her own way, that the silence from her phone, her absence from their bed, the hollow space she left in their home, none of it was what it seemed. But then, just an hour before the service, his phone had buzzed. A photo, a message. The image burned into his brain like a brand. Claire, lounging by a pool, cocktail in hand. A man beside her. Close. Too close. Sunlight gleamed off her sunglasses. She was smiling, laughing. The text beneath it had been short, precise. Thought you should see what your wife is really doing today. A concerned friend. Jacob had felt something inside him crack open. She wasn't grieving. She wasn't drowning in sorrow, in guilt, in the unbearable weight of loss. She was celebrating. His grief hardened into something else, something colder. His fingers twitched around the phone as he forced himself to return to the moment. People were watching him. He could feel their eyes, their pity. Neighbors, old friends, strangers who pretended they understood his pain. Mrs. Holloway, their elderly neighbor, sniffled into a handkerchief. The pastor spoke of Noah's laughter, his kindness, his bright little soul. Someone sobbed in the back. Jacob felt none of it. Instead, his mind replayed the message over and over, the words sinking into his bones like venom. What your wife is really doing today. A slow rage uncurled inside him. Claire had left him to bury their son alone. She had abandoned the one person who had loved her unconditionally, the one soul who had deserved so much more. Jacob clenched his jaw, forcing himself to look at the casket again. The polished wood gleamed under the dim church lights. He had chosen white because it felt pure, innocent, like Noah. But nothing about this moment felt right. The universe had made a mistake. His son should be here. Claire should be here. The priest's voice faded, replaced by a suffocating silence. A long pause. Then, gently, would the father like to say a few words? Jacob's throat tightened. His body locked up. Say something. He stood there, frozen, his mind a storm of grief and betrayal. The casket in front of him, the picture on his phone behind his eyes. The stark contrast between the two realities shattered him. He opened his mouth, then closed it. His hands curled at his sides. He shook his head. No. The priest hesitated, then nodded. The service continued. Jacob sat down, staring straight ahead, unmoving, unblinking. The rest of the funeral passed in a blur. Soft whispers, distant sobs, hands gripping his shoulder. He barely felt them. And when it was finally over, when the last guest had left and the weight of silence pressed down on the empty church, Jacob exhaled. A long, slow breath. He looked down at his phone once more. At the image of Claire, bathed in sunlight, smiling like she hadn't destroyed everything. His grief had no room for forgiveness. His sorrow had no space for mercy. Claire thought she could leave. She thought she could escape the weight of what she'd done. She was wrong. The house was suffocating. People had come and gone, offering condolences that meant nothing, leaving behind dishes of food Jacob would never eat. He didn't want their casseroles, their pity, or their empty words. He wanted Noah. But Noah was gone. Now, the house was silent. The kind of silence that presses against your chest like a weight, that makes your own breath sound too loud. Jacob stood in the doorway of his son's bedroom, staring into the space where his little boy had once lived, laughed, and dreamed. The walls were still painted in soft blues, lined with shelves of books they used to read together at night. A stuffed bear sat at the foot of the bed, its fur slightly worn from Noah clutching it in his sleep. Everything was still here, everything except him. Jacob stepped inside, the floor creaking beneath his weight. He ran his fingers over Noah's dresser, over the little things that no longer had an owner, a tiny pair of socks, a toy car, a crayon drawing of their family that Noah had once proudly taped to the wall. He swallowed hard. Then, his gaze landed on the desk. Claire's desk. It sat in the corner of the room, neat and untouched. Claire had always been meticulous, keeping everything in order, except for their marriage, except for their son. Something about it nagged at him, a feeling deep in his gut, like a whisper urging him forward. Jacob approached the desk and pulled open the top drawer. Papers neatly stacked, bills, medical records, things he already knew. But then he saw it. A folder labeled in Claire's careful handwriting, policy. His fingers trembled as he pulled it out. He flipped it open, and his world cracked open with it. Life insurance policy. Noah's name was printed at the top, Claire's signature at the bottom. Jacob's breath came in sharp, uneven bursts as he scanned the pages, his eyes catching on the details that made his skin crawl. Claire had taken out the policy 6 months after Noah's diagnosis. She had taken out loans against it. She had amended it to remove Jacob as a beneficiary, weeks before Noah's death. Jacob stared at the ink on the paper, his mind refusing to believe what his eyes were seeing. This wasn't grief. This wasn't mourning. This was betrayal. Claire had turned their son's death into a payout. Jacob's grip tightened on the folder, his knuckles white. His whole body felt like it was burning from the inside out. His wife, Noah's mother, hadn't just abandoned them. She had profited from their son's death. A sound rang through the house, a sharp vibration against the wood of the desk. His phone. Jacob barely registered picking it up, barely heard himself answer. Hello. A voice on the other end. A woman's voice, low and urgent. You don't know me, but you need to listen. It's about Claire. Jacob's pulse hammered. His grip tightened on the phone. Who the hell are you? A pause. Then, the voice came again. My name is Mia, and I know exactly what she's done. The coffee shop was a far cry from the places Claire preferred. No marble countertops, no overpriced lattes, no curated aesthetic to project the illusion of a perfect life. Just scuffed wooden floors, the bitter smell of burnt espresso, and a tired-looking barista who didn't bother to fake a smile. Jacob doubted Claire had ever stepped foot in a place like this. That was part of why he agreed to meet here. He spotted Mia instantly. She sat in the corner, half hidden in the shadows, fingers wrapped around a cheap ceramic mug. Her auburn hair was pulled back into a careless ponytail, a few loose strands falling into her face. She wasn't looking at him, just staring into the depths of her coffee, stirring absent-mindedly. Jacob walked over, each step deliberate. He wasn't here to waste time. She didn't acknowledge him until he slid into the chair across from her. Then, finally, she looked up. Her eyes were sharp, watching, calculating. "I didn't think you'd come," she murmured, taking a slow sip of coffee. Jacob dropped a folder onto the table with a dull thud. Inside was everything he had found in Claire's desk: the insurance policy, the bank withdrawals, the cold legal proof that his wife had turned their son's death into a financial transaction. His voice was steady, but his fingers curled into fists beneath the table. "You have 5 minutes. Talk." Mia smirked, but there was no humor in it. Just something bitter, straight to the point. "I like that." She leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "Your wife's been seeing my ex for over a year." Jacob didn't flinch. "I know." Mia arched an eyebrow. "Oh, do you?" She reached into her coat pocket, pulled out her phone, and slid it across the table. "Do you know about the money? About the house they're planning to buy in Maui?" The screen was filled with text messages. Dozens of them. Jacob forced himself to read. "Claire, the payout came through. More than enough. We'll be out of here by the end of the month. Brandon, Maui's waiting babe. Just don't let him suspect anything. Claire, he won't. He's too broken to see." The words blurred. A roaring sound filled Jacob's ears, drowning out the clatter of dishes, the low hum of conversation around them. He gripped the phone so tightly his knuckles turned white. Mia watched him carefully. "I found those messages a week ago. That's when I realized what she really was." She shook her head, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "Claire never loved him. She's using him just like she used you." Jacob placed the phone down, exhaling slowly. He wouldn't let anger control him. Not yet. "How do I know you're not lying?" he asked. Mia let out a dry chuckle. "Because I've got nothing left to lose." She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Claire doesn't give a damn about either of us. She's moving the money into offshore accounts. She's leaving next week. Alone." A sharp, suffocating silence settled between them. Mia let the words sink in before adding, she was never planning to take Brandon with her. Jacob's grip tightened on the table's edge. Of course, Claire never left loose ends. "She's been planning this for months," Mia continued. "The insurance payout, the fake documents, the loans. She's setting herself up for a fresh start, a new identity, a new life, and she doesn't care who she destroys in the process." Jacob looked up, meeting Mia's gaze. She wasn't just some scorned ex-girlfriend looking for revenge. She was just like him. Burned, betrayed, ready to make Claire pay. Mia gave him a slow, knowing smile. "So, what are we going to do about it?" And for the first time in weeks, Jacob felt something other than grief. He felt purpose. Mia's apartment was small, cluttered, and smelled faintly of burnt coffee. A stack of unopened bills sat on the counter, a silent testament to the wreckage Brandon had left in his wake. Jacob sat across from her at the tiny kitchen table, his fingers drumming against the wood as she scrolled through her phone. "He's a cocky bastard," she muttered, eyes fixed on the screen. "He won't even question why I'm texting him after all this time." Jacob exhaled sharply, forcing himself to stay calm. Everything in his world had shattered in the past 48 hours, and now he was sitting in a stranger's apartment, conspiring against his own wife. His ex-wife. Mia's phone vibrated. She smirked. "Told you." She turned the screen toward him. "Brandon, didn't expect to hear from you. What's up, babe?" Jacob clenched his jaw. "Babe." The casual arrogance of it made his skin crawl. Claire had probably called him the same thing. Whispered it in his ear while Noah was dying. Mia typed back, Mia, I miss you. Can we talk? Brandon's response was immediate. Brandon, of course. My place? Jacob met Mia's gaze. They didn't need to speak. It was working. She typed again. Midnight. Just us. A pause. Then the three dots blinked. Brandon. See you then. Mia locked the phone and leaned back in her chair. There. Easy. Jacob exhaled, his pulse steadying. I'll be outside. When you get him talking, I'll come in. Mia studied him, tapping a fingernail against her mug. And then what? Jacob didn't answer, because he didn't know yet. Would he beat the truth out of Brandon? Would he put his hands around his throat and squeeze until every last lie fell from his lips? Would he pull the gun from his jacket and press it against his skull just to see the fear in his eyes? He only knew one thing. Brandon wasn't walking away from this untouched. Midnight came like a slow, creeping storm. Jacob waited in the shadows outside Brandon's apartment, the weight of the gun pressing against his ribs. He had tucked it beneath his jacket, just in case. Mia arrived on time, dressed simple, a loose sweater hanging off one shoulder, jeans hugging her frame. Not too revealing, just enough to remind Brandon of what he'd lost. Jacob hated how easily the man would fall for it. From his hiding spot near the side of the building, he watched as Mia knocked. The door opened, revealing Brandon, tall, muscular, and oozing the kind of arrogance that made Jacob's fists itch. Damn, Brandon drawled, leaning against the doorframe. Didn't think I'd ever see you again. Mia gave a small, coy smile. Well, here I am. Brandon grinned, stepping aside. Come in. Jacob moved closer, heart hammering as the door shut behind her. He pressed his ear against the cool metal, listening. Inside, Mia let Brandon pour her drink. She took it, but didn't sip, watching as he settled onto the couch beside her. So, he mused, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. What's this really about? You miss me? Mia tilted her head, letting her fingers graze the rim of her glass. Something like that. Brandon smirked. Too bad. I'm kind of seeing someone. Mia forced a laugh. Oh, I know. She traced a finger down his arm. Claire, right? Brandon tensed, just for a second. Then, he recovered, leaning back with a lazy grin. So you do your homework now? That's cute. Mia's smile didn't waver. She's a real piece of work. Brandon exhaled through his nose. Yeah, she is. He took a sip, his gaze sharpening. But she's smart. Smarter than you. Smarter than Jacob. Mia's nails dug into her palm. She left him, you know. Brandon's grin widened. Yeah, and Mia played the part well, leaning in, dropping her voice to something low and conspiratorial. And she left you too. Brandon's smirk wavered. Mia twisted the knife, took the money, booked the flight. Did you really think she was waiting for you? Brandon scoffed, but the way his grip tightened around the glass betrayed him. Bullshit. Mia leaned closer. Check your bank account. Brandon hesitated. Then, with a frustrated grunt, he pulled out his phone. His expression twisted as he scrolled. His voice was sharp, anger seeping in. That bitch. The glass slammed onto the table, liquid sloshing over the edge. That's when Jacob stepped inside. The door creaked as it swung open, and Brandon's head snapped up. Jacob met his gaze, stepping into the dim light. Brandon's lips curled. You gotta be kidding me. Jacob didn't stop moving. Didn't stop until he was towering over the man who had stolen his wife, his son's memory, his life. Brandon smirked, trying to mask the tension in his shoulders. What? You two best friends now? Jacob's fist flew before he could think. A sharp crack echoed as Brandon's head snapped back, blood spurting from his nose. He barely had time to react before Jacob grabbed his shirt, yanking him forward. You're going to tell me everything, Jacob growled, shoving him against the couch. Or I swear to God. Brandon wiped at the blood dripping from his nose and laughed. Laughed. Oh man. He winced, shaking his head. You really don't get it, do you? Jacob's grip tightened. Get what? Brandon smirked, voice dripping with cruel amusement. Claire played all of us. Silence. Jacob's pulse pounded in his ears. What? Brandon leaned in, eyes dark. She used you for the money. She used me for the exit plan. And guess what? She's already gone. The world tilted. Jacob stumbled back, breath short. Mia stood, face pale. That's not possible. I had eyes on her account. She couldn't have. Brandon laughed again, shaking his head. She was always 2 steps ahead. You really think she'd wait around for either of us? Jacob's vision blurred with fury. Claire was gone, and they were too late. For now, Brandon's apartment smelled like stale beer and cheap cologne. The kind of place where arrogance festered, where lies were whispered between drinks and betrayals were swept under unmade sheets. Jacob had never been here before, but he knew this place. It was where Claire had laughed, had kissed, had planned a life without him. And now, he was here to burn it all down. Brandon sat slumped in the worn leather armchair, a thin trickle of blood snaking down from his temple where Jacob's fist had landed. His cocky smirk was faltering now, but not gone. Not yet. Jacob pressed the barrel of his gun against Brandon's forehead. The metal was cold, unforgiving. Like him. Talk. Brandon licked his split lip, chuckling low. You think I'm scared of you? His voice was hoarse, but the arrogance hadn't left. I know exactly what you are. A sad little man who got played. Jacob's grip tightened on the gun. His finger rested against the trigger, not squeezing, not yet. Brandon exhaled through his nose, shaking his head. You don't get it, do you? His smirk widened, exposing blood-stained teeth. She's already gone. The world tilted. The words were a hammer to Jacob's ribs, knocking the breath from his lungs. Gone? Brandon saw the flicker of hesitation and grinned. He leaned forward just enough that the gun was practically nestled between his brows. She's both of us, man. Me, you, Noah. Jacob saw red. He slammed the butt of the gun into Brandon's cheek. The man yelped, lurching sideways, but Jacob grabbed him by the collar, dragging him upright. Say his name again. His voice was low, dangerous. Brandon groaned, spitting blood onto the floor. His breathing was ragged, but his eyes, they were triumphant. Jacob had been a fool. He had thought Claire was running to Brandon, that they were in this together. But Brandon wasn't her escape plan. He was just another casualty. A bitter laugh rose in Jacob's throat, but he swallowed it down. Claire had never planned on keeping either of them. Brandon sucked in a shaky breath. She played me too. Jacob stepped back. His hand shook, but not with fear, with something deeper, something jagged and raw. Mia. He turned, and there she was, standing near the doorway, watching in eerie silence. She hadn't moved when Jacob threw the first punch, hadn't flinched when the gun was drawn. And now, she wasn't surprised. Jacob's stomach twisted. You knew. Mia didn't deny it. She simply tilted her head, her expression unreadable. Not everything, but enough. His pulse pounded. Mia had let him believe Claire was still with Brandon. Let him believe this was about exposing an affair, about confronting 2 traitors. But the truth was worse. Claire was smarter than that. She had drained the insurance money, wiped their joint accounts, and vanished. Not to be with Brandon, but to be alone. To be free. Brandon laughed again, broken and bitter. Face it, man. She left you in the dirt. Jacob barely heard him. His mind was spinning, memories crashing together. Claire's empty promises, her forced grief, the way she hadn't cried when Noah died, the way she had left. She had wanted out for a long time. And now, she had finally done it. Jacob turned back to Brandon, his grip tightening on the gun. It would be easy, so easy. One pull of the trigger, and at least one liar would pay for what they'd done. But killing Brandon wouldn't fix this. Because Claire was still out there. Mia stepped closer, voice soft. We can find her. Jacob exhaled slowly, lowering the gun. Claire had destroyed everything, had stolen their son's death and turned it into profit. But this wasn't over. No, this was just the beginning. Jacob had always imagined that grief would dull with time, that after a loss as devastating as Noah's, the pain would slowly soften, its edges no longer sharp enough to cut. He was wrong. Grief had not dulled. It had sharpened into something else, something primal, something hungry. And it had a name: revenge. Jacob sat in Mia's dimly lit apartment, the weight of his discovery pressing down on him like an iron vice. The room smelled of stale coffee and cigarette smoke, though Mia wasn't smoking. She just liked to let the cigarette burn out, watching the tendrils of smoke curl toward the ceiling like ghosts. She sat across from him, legs folded beneath her, her laptop balanced on one knee. "She's already on the move," she murmured, scrolling through transaction records with a focused intensity. Jacob's jaw clenched. "Where?" Mia turned the screen toward him. A set of numbers and locations flashed by, each one another nail in Claire's coffin. A wire transfer, $250,000. Destination, a private account in the Cayman Islands. A flight booked under an alias. Departing LAX. Destination, Maui. A cold chill crawled up Jacob's spine. Maui, the place she had dreamt of escaping to. The paradise she had traded their son's life for. Jacob exhaled slowly. "She's hiding there." Mia gave a bitter laugh, shaking her head. "Not hiding, waiting." Jacob frowned. "For what?" Mia locked eyes with him. Her gaze was dark, knowing. "For you." The turbulence rattled the plane, but Jacob barely noticed. He sat by the window, fingers curled into fists, staring down at the endless ocean below. The blue stretched out in all directions, peaceful and unbothered. His mind, however, was anything but peaceful. Noah had loved the ocean. He used to press his small hands against the aquarium glass, watching the fish dart through the water with wide-eyed wonder. "Look, Daddy, they're flying underwater." Now Noah's gone, and Claire was in paradise, spending his blood money like it had no weight. Jacob closed his eyes. His grief no longer felt like an anchor. It felt like a blade, sharp and gleaming. Beside him, Mia flipped through the documents they had compiled. Claire's financial records, bank statements, proof of her betrayal. She had printed it all out, as if the physical evidence made it more real. "What happens when we get there?" she asked, voice even. Jacob turned to her, his expression unreadable. "We end it." Mia held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded. They didn't speak for the rest of the flight. Maui was beautiful, golden sunlight spilling over the swaying palm trees, the scent of salt and hibiscus thick in the air. Tourists moved in lazy, relaxed patterns, their biggest concern being which beach to visit next. But Jacob and Mia weren't here to relax. They stood in the airport's rental car lot, the heat pressing against their skin. Mia held up her phone. Her rental is at a villa up the coast. Secluded, expensive, paid in cash. Jacob gave a humorless laugh. "Of course it is." They drove in silence, the highway winding along the cliffs, waves crashing below. Every mile they covered brought them closer to the moment Jacob had been waiting for. The reckoning. The house was exactly what he had expected. Modern, sleek, the kind of place Claire had always fantasized about. The driveway was empty except for a luxury rental car parked beneath the swaying palms. Jacob killed the engine. For a long moment, neither he nor Mia moved. Then, slowly, Mia reached into the glove compartment, pulling out a small revolver. She turned it in her hands, the metal catching the sunlight. Jacob's eyes flicked to it. "Do you even know how to use that?" Mia smirked. "You'd be surprised." Jacob didn't argue. He wasn't sure what this was going to turn into. Confrontation? A confession? Something worse? He stepped out of the car, his pulse steady. The villa door was slightly ajar. Mia noticed it too, her posture tensing. "That's not right." Jacob moved forward, slowly pushing the door open. Inside, the house was bathed in golden light, the scent of expensive perfume thick in the air. Claire's perfume. And then, the sound of a wine glass tipping over. Jacob turned the corner, and there she was, Claire, lounging on the white couch, a half-empty glass of red in her hand. Her eyes locked onto his, and instead of shock, instead of fear, she smiled. "Took you long enough," she said. The trap had been set, and Jacob had just walked into it. The ocean stretched endlessly behind her, waves lapping softly against the shore. The villa was stunning, whitewashed walls, floor-to-ceiling windows, an infinity pool reflecting the golden hues of the setting sun. It was the kind of place people escaped to, where sins could be washed away in the tide. But there would be no escape for Claire. Jacob stood at the edge of the terrace, the soft sea breeze barely touching the fire burning inside him. Claire was here, in paradise, drinking wine as if she hadn't left behind a grave. She hadn't seen him yet. She was lounging on a cushioned chair, legs stretched out, the stem of her glass dangling from her fingers. A silk robe draped over her shoulders, the kind of luxury she'd stolen from their son's death. From him. Jacob clenched his fists, stepping forward. The moment she noticed him, everything changed. Her body stiffened, fingers tightening around the glass. Her breath hitched. For a second, just a second, her mask cracked, and Jacob saw the raw fear beneath. Then, just as quickly, she smoothed it over. "Jacob," her voice was soft, cautious. "What are you doing here?" A slow, bitter smile curled at his lips. "Did you really think you'd get away with it?" Claire exhaled sharply, setting her glass down with careful precision. She sat up, back straight, as if bracing herself. "I don't know what you think you know." Jacob let out a low, humorless laugh. "Oh, I know, Claire. I know about the money, the insurance, the loans. I know you planned this from the moment Noah got sick." She flinched. For once, she didn't have a lie ready. Jacob reached into his jacket and tossed a thick folder onto the table between them. Pages spilled out, copies of the policy, bank statements, messages between her and Brandon. Evidence. Her eyes flicked to the papers, but she didn't move to touch them. Instead, she licked her lips, gaze shifting back to him. Calculating. "Listen to me," she said carefully, voice honeyed. "This isn't what you think." Jacob tilted his head. "No. No." She leaned forward, hands out as if reaching for him. "I didn't plan this, Jacob. I was drowning. We both were. The medical bills, the debt. She swallowed, her voice breaking at just the right moment. "I made mistakes." She was good. Once, he might have believed her. But now, all he saw was the woman who left her son to die alone while she drank cocktails by a pool. "You didn't just make mistakes," he said, stepping closer. His voice was low, steady. "You made choices." Claire's jaw clenched. The cracks in her performance deepened. "What do you want?" "Justice." Her eyes darted past him, toward the villa's entrance. She was stalling. Jacob followed her gaze and smiled. "Waiting for someone?" Her expression shuddered. "Jacob." A soft click echoed behind him, the front door swinging shut. "Mia." Claire's breath caught. "Oh my God." Jacob turned just enough to see Mia step onto the terrace, her expression cold, unreadable. Claire shot to her feet. "What the hell is she doing here?" "She wanted to see you too." Jacob's voice was almost casual. "Seems you played both of us." Claire's eyes darted between them. Her mind was spinning, trying to calculate the odds, the angles. How do I get out of this? How do I survive? But there was no way out. Mia stepped forward, tossing her own set of papers onto the table. Brandon's messages, flight receipts, Claire's escape plan in black and white. "You never planned to take him with you," Mia said, her voice laced with venom. "Just like you never planned to tell Jacob about the money." Claire exhaled sharply, shaking her head. "I had to leave. You don't understand. You left your son to die." The words hit like a bullet. Jacob saw it in her eyes, the fleeting moment of real fear. Not for Noah, not for what she'd done. Fear for herself. The silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. Then, in a single, desperate motion, Claire lunged for her purse. Jacob moved faster. He grabbed her wrist, twisting hard. She yelped, the purse falling to the ground, a small handgun clattering onto the marble floor. Mia kicked it away. Jacob tightened his grip, forcing her to look at him. You were going to shoot me? Claire's chest heaved. Aye. Her eyes darted to Mia, pleading, you don't have to do this. Mia didn't answer. Jacob slowly released Claire's wrist, letting her stumble back. For a long moment, he just looked at her, at the woman he once loved, the mother of his child. And all he felt was emptiness. You deserve worse than prison. His voice was quiet. But that's where you're going. Claire's face twisted in horror. Jacob, please. Sirens wailed in the distance. Her eyes widened. Mia had already called them. Claire turned to run, but there was nowhere to go. Jacob watched as red and blue lights reflected off the villa's pristine walls as officers stormed onto the terrace, shouting commands. He barely heard them. His gaze stayed locked on Claire as she was forced to the ground, wrists yanked behind her, cuffs snapping into place. She struggled, screamed, but it didn't matter. It was over. Jacob exhaled, a weight lifting from his chest for the first time in months. Noah could rest now. And Claire? Claire would rot. The waves crashed below. The sun sank into the horizon. And Jacob finally walked away.